Have you ever wondered what mysteries might be concealed in plain sight? What if those closest to you concealed information that could change your life? Imagine learning about a history you were unaware of between your spouse and best friend. The question remains, are her kids, whom you've always loved like family, really your husband's? We're exploring the core of a discovery that has the potential to completely alter everything today. Let's see what the reality is. I believe my husband fathered the children of his best buddy, and now one of them is interested in my daughter. Every name is a hoax. This started off as a sinister, bothersome notion that I could not get rid of, and it has since grown into a poisonous blossom that permeates every part of my mind. Amy and my husband Luke are 43, and I am 42. Luke has known Amy since he was 7, but I only met him in college. They were great friends who did everything together and had an inherent understanding of one another. They have consistently maintained that they are each other's surrogate siblings. Amy's closeness to Luke naturally made me feel threatened as a new girlfriend. Still, they both informed me that I didn't need to worry, that their relationship was not romantic and had never been sexual, and that Amy was simply Luke's sister. Any insecurities regarding Amy quickly vanished after I decided to believe them. She also became a buddy of mine. Our wedding was even officiated by her. Luke and I have always had a close bond and have created a fantastic life together. We continued seeing a lot of Amy after we were married and lived together, and I was okay with that. Amy constantly complained about how unlucky she was in love, so I went to town to help her find a mate. After we were married, Luke and I began having kids, and Amy did the same at about the same time. To put things in perspective, my kids are Carter, 6, Louise, 10, Owen, 12, and Sophie, 15. Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and twins Adam and Jenna, 9, are Amy's children. Amy wasn't married yet, therefore she wasn't in a relationship. As far as I could tell, she only dates sometimes. As our family developed and Luke and I had more children, Amy would occasionally become pregnant. Luke and I were unaware of the fathers involved, and it only happened a few times. I reasoned that Amy might not be keeping in contact with her partners and was instead engaging in casual encounters. Luke concurred that this was most likely the solution. Amy always said no when I asked if she knew the paternity. I didn't question her because she didn't seem concerned about raising children alone. Of course, there was the fact that she had us to back her up. Amy never sought assistance, but Luke refused to let his best friend suffer since she had kids to support. We are fortunate and privileged financially. Luke has affluent parents who were pleased to support Amy because they already knew and loved her, and I have well-paying work. My in-laws are the most polite and compassionate people, and they defy all cliches. With our assistance, Amy was able to locate a home to remain with her children. Although some would be inclined to refer to her as a leech, none of us did, and I never viewed it that way. We could give her the assistance she required. I am also aware that she will be criticized for her carelessness and asked why she never used more effective birth control. To be honest, I don't fully understand that lengthy story. She placed a high value on not using birth control and accepting the consequences of her decision. Although it wasn't driven by religion, Amy found it necessary. Amy has been Luke's best friend, and they frequently hang out without me. I was okay with it. Occasionally, I also spent time alone with Amy, though Luke spent more time with her because she was his first buddy. This involved him visiting her home and occasionally even staying overnight. Now that I think about it, was I foolish to put my faith in him and feel nothing was happening? Maybe, but they posed as friends, as brothers, for years. Never once did I sense a connection between them. Our children were raised together, as one might anticipate, but not in the same home since, although it is a good size, it is not large enough to accommodate 8 children. However, we made sure Amy's kids met ours early on, and they were always friendly. Strong friendships have developed throughout the years, which is beneficial, mainly if they are related, as I assume. I have been putting off getting to the crux of the matter. Indeed, I now believe that Luke is the father of at least one of Amy's children, if not all of them. To be honest, I do believe they are all his. My spouse hasn't shown me any signs of being unfaithful, and I would never have thought he was capable of doing such a thing. He does, however, spend a lot of time with Amy, and I must admit that I haven't seen her with a real partner over the years. At parties and bars, she approached men. I even attempted to be her wingman, but nothing seemed to work out. I wanted to know when she initially became pregnant. I started to question whether she had a hidden partner that she didn't want us to know about for whatever reason when it kept happening. However, I could not come up with a single justification for her keeping him hidden, particularly from her kids. Luke and I decided it was time for Carter, our youngest, to undergo a vasectomy after he was born. Only a few years ago, Amy's twins were born. Luke and I remained close after the procedure, but I was free of the thought of getting pregnant. After the twins, Amy never became pregnant again. Is it a coincidence that after Luke had a vasectomy, neither of us became pregnant again? I'm still determining. However, Luke would continue to pay her a visit, and he would also be checking up on her kids. Generally speaking, I ought to have given it more thought earlier. Luke is the father they never had, and he has always behaved like a father to them, mainly as they have grown older. However, he has never in any way neglected me or our kids. He's working 2 jobs. The notion that he serves as a surrogate father to Amy's fatherless children isn't necessarily suspicious. It could be considered admirable. However, it combines many other minor elements, such as look. I would prefer to restrict the identifying characteristics of the individuals involved and keep this whole situation as ambiguous as possible. Therefore, I won't go into specifics about eye or hair color or distinctive physical characteristics. Nevertheless, let's just say that Amy's kids appear to be Luke's. Luke shares Kay's extremely uncommon allergy. He looks a lot like the twins, especially Adam. I can see more of Luke in Tom's looks and demeanor as he ages. Although their race is irrelevant, Amy's children appear mixed, and Luke differs from Amy's. It would be easy for me to assume that Luke and their father are of the same race. Although it seems that way, Luke doesn't necessarily have to be the father. I've never told Amy or Luke about my worries. I already know they will vehemently refute my charges and be offended, so I don't want to be the wrong person. What if my children or Amy's children heard about that drama? In any case, Luke still spends time with Amy and her kids, just as Amy's kids spend time with me. I've told Luke I wish he wouldn't pay Amy as much attention and that I feel needy for more, but he either didn't notice or seemed to ignore my signals. He has never abandoned me for her, so I don't want to promote the notion that he favors her because it isn't even true. I just can't get rid of the idea that Luke and Amy have had a lot of intimate moments together in the past. As far as I know, Amy also had no genuine desire to have children. She didn't object to it, and she fell in love with each of her children the moment they were born. However, becoming a mother was never part of her identity or life plan. She occasionally mentioned having a spouse and kids when we discussed the future in her big picture. Still, it never felt like something she was primarily focused on. Therefore, I don't believe that Amy's motivation for cheating was Luke merely giving her children. A side consequence would have been that. For years, I've been ignoring this and letting it go. After Kay's allergy was identified, it was a sinister thought that I pushed away. It worsened after the twins were delivered. I also brushed it off then. I wanted to feel relieved when Amy stopped having children. Still, Luke had undergone a vasectomy, which, if anything, increased my concern. Some evenings, I wished the twins had arrived sooner rather than later following Luke's surgery. Even if I could be mistaken, I don't want to be the one to destroy our family, even though it has been tearing me up for a while. However, I'm terrified today because our child's social circle has changed in the past 3 months. Amy's oldest son, Tom, proposed to Sophie. Over the past few years, my oldest child, Sophie, has grown into an outspoken beauty, so I'm not surprised she's attracting men's attention. But I was shocked when Tom asked her out. Sophie answered no, but only because she knew she would have to ask me first. I'm very protective of her dating exploration. She wanted to say yes, and I could tell she was flattered and intrigued by his desire. Bless her. She did everything correctly when she contacted me to discuss it. She probably thought I would agree with her and let her date Tom. To her astonishment, I firmly refused. There was some dispute as a result. She simply didn't understand why she couldn't date him, and I was unable to explain it to her. She didn't even want to date him that much. He is too old for you, which is all I could think of, but that isn't the point. I was interested to see how Amy and Luke would react when they heard. I believe I would have been relieved and regarded it as evidence that I was mistaken about something happening between them and who was the father of Amy's children, if either had agreed with Sophie and attempted to persuade me that the two should be let to date. However, they chose my side, so the ambiguity persisted. Though not as vehemently as I did, they put their foot down. Luke concurred with me, but was concerned that if it were prohibited, Sophie would become even more desirous of a romance. In that regard, he is very likely correct. Although she supported me and didn't want Tom to date Sophie, Amy didn't appear interested. It seemed to be a passing crush on her. No, it wasn't. Tom would increasingly spend time with Sophie in the months after these talks, alone or with other friends whenever possible. Tom is obviously smitten with Sophie and wants to be with her, and he most definitely wants to have sex with her. His eyes have been straying a lot, and I've been keeping a close eye on them. I feel helpless even though I'm doing everything possible to prevent this romance from growing. Sophie still hangs out with Tom as a friend, so she hasn't wholly disobeyed me. Therefore, making them quit hanging together would be irrational and probably encourage them to sneak around. However, I'm terrified that they're already doing that. The idea that they are covertly dating and engaging in questionable activities while no one is looking is my worst fear. Sophie doesn't object, and I've seen Tom becoming a little handsy with her. I'm at a loss for words. I had considered attempting to persuade Sophie that Tom is similar to her brother. Still, if she disagrees, I can't change their relationship or their friendships past. Although my kids may view Amy's kids as best friends, I have always thought of Amy and her kids as family. Naturally, the issue is that if my husband has been having an affair for years and I am correct in determining Amy's children's paternity, then Tom and Sophie are never more than friends. End of conversation. But it seems like there is nothing I can do about it. Amy and Luke have reportedly discussed this with Tom, but he is persistent and won't let up on Sophie. I believe she appreciates his loyalty and care. Even though I know Tom well and know he would be a terrific fit for Sophie, he has approached me and questioned why I'm so opposed. My only option was to rely on the fact that she was too young for him, but it wouldn't work in the long run. They'll pursue this fervently once they're adults, and there won't be much I can do about it if, heaven forbid, they're still drawn to one another in a few years. I agree with Amy and Luke that Tom cannot date Sophie, but they haven't done anything else. They share my sense of helplessness in trying to stop adolescent love. It seems they have given up and are burying their heads in the sand, expecting the emotions to fade as Tom and Sophie get older. Given that they are in high school, it's possible that Tom and Sophie won't stay together forever. However, I worry that before they reach that point, she may allow him to have an intimate relationship with her that neither can undo. I am on the verge of opening a door I cannot close. I was on the verge of yelling at Luke that if he hadn't cheated on me years ago, none of this would be occurring. Without my knowledge, he would have been using his surrogate sister to essentially raise a second family. Luke's son now wants to be with our daughter, his sister, even though he only remembers her as a buddy from his early years. And Luke and Amy are solely to blame. Everything is blown to hell if I speak up. If I were mistaken, I would be a monster for accusing my best friend and the love of my life of something terrible. It still destroys our entire framework if I'm correct. Everyone would suffer, and the family and societal structure we have cultivated over the past several years would vanish. Sophie will eventually become Tom's girlfriend if I do nothing, even if Luke and I do not divorce. I secretly fear that it will occur sooner rather than later, or worse, that it has already happened. As kids get older, I sincerely hope that this relationship ends. What if it doesn't, though? What if they decide to get married and start a family after years of dating? If I told Sophie the truth about Amy's children, many lives would be ruined because then everyone else would know. My children's opinion of their father and Aunt Amy would be wholly destroyed. I can't imagine how much it would upset Luke, who is Owen's hero. What about the kids that Amy has? All of this is innocent of them. I don't want to hurt them. They didn't ask for it or have any choice over their origins. To be honest, I'm not happy with Tom right now. I wanted to snatch his fangs when I witnessed him touch Sophie's butt a week ago. Even so, he shouldn't have to live with the knowledge that the person he's been fantasizing about is actually his half-sister. Everything is so disorganized, and I'm at a loss for what to do. For a long time, I have ignored my husband's and his closest friends' insults. I had assumed I could cope with it, but this circumstance involving Tom and Sophie really upset me. Around a year ago, I proposed that we perform one of those to gauge Luke's response. He was adamantly opposed to it, claiming that ancestry tests were a fraud and that the government shouldn't have our DNA. Guess which of us Amy agreed with when I brought it up? The problem is, I believe he knows that. If it is accurate, I know it has been an unspoken truth for some time, and I am not dreaming. The stakes were high, and I was in an unclear situation. I felt that anything could go wrong, and probably would, regardless of my decision. For the past 5 years, I've been speculating about various ways I may handle this if I ever decide to take action. I had already made the decision to undergo a covert DNA test. Ultimately, I could not complete it, and I now regret not doing so because the opportunity to do so has practically passed. I believed that testing someone else's child without their knowledge would be inappropriate. Ethically, it was risky. I spoke with my attorney, who suggested against it, stating that it might reflect ill on me in a divorce court regardless of the outcome. I still need to know, so I wish I had done it quietly and kept it from everyone. And I still need to be more optimistic. I also thought of informing Sophie privately, but after giving it some more thinking, even that seemed improper. I didn't know I had the right to cast such doubt on her father without first speaking with him. In the end, I went straight up to Luke and Amy. Since I assumed they would tell one other what had happened in their own words before I could adequately explain myself, I finally told them we needed to have a serious conversation and would approach only one. I wanted my words to be heard immediately by both of them. I wrote down all of my suspicions and their reasoning after every child went to school. I expressed my love for them and mentioned how I had discovered the parallels between Luke and Amy's kids through hints. Luke, Sophie, Tom, and Adam have all been sleepwalkers in the past. The concept lingered in my mind for a while, but I kept saying how much they mattered and that I didn't want to believe it. And since Sophie and Tom were in love, it was essential to talk about it. I thus inquired as to whether they had ever gone too far, whether Luke had ever cheated on them, and whether there was even the remotest chance that any of Amy's children were his. I made every effort not to cry. Their responses were nearly flawless, just as I had anticipated. I honestly couldn't tell if the comments were powerful gaslighting or sincere because they were so well rehearsed. Amy appeared more visibly disturbed than Luke. He looked crushed, while Amy was outraged and furious at the claim. I can't tell, but it might have been an act. Every point I brought up received an acceptable response from them. They asked me why I felt terrible about it since I had never previously opposed their spending time together. Additionally, they noted that shared characteristics like hair color may easily be a coincidence, and that Amy's children didn't necessarily resemble Luke in any particular manner. They also reminded me that I had previously praised Luke for being present for Amy's children and had always supported his presence in their lives. It appeared that I was now denouncing that same conduct. They questioned how I could possibly think this of them, and what I wanted them to accomplish. Why hadn't I mentioned it sooner? Amy felt more betrayed and defensive, but Luke appeared more understanding, or at least he pretended to accept my feelings. Even though I'm still unsure about my actions, I apologized several times. Luke even expressed regret for any actions that would have given the impression that he was unfaithful. Amy yelled that it was none of my concern when I asked her directly who had fathered her children if it wasn't Luke. After my claims, it was obvious that she didn't want to show me any vulnerability. I'm ashamed to report that I lost my anger and said that it wasn't too much to expect some transparency after everything we'd done for her and her kids. Amy retaliated by claiming that Luke and his parents, not me, had supported her and that I had never done anything for her. She continued by accusing me of constantly behaving superiorly, which I don't think I did. Still, it's possible that I unintentionally conveyed that impression. The tension in the room was high, despite Luke's attempts to soothe her. Reddit. I'm at my wit's end. Of course, there is a way to know for sure. Not about Luke's faithfulness, but about Amy's children's paternity. I therefore asked Luke if he would think about doing a DNA test for our daughter's future and for my own peace of mind. I told him I needed this, even though I knew he didn't like and trusted these exams. Luke grudgingly consented to a DNA test, but appeared genuinely offended that his word wasn't enough. Amy, regrettably, flatly refused. She was enraged and repeatedly told me to back off, saying unequivocally that I would not be receiving samples of her children's DNA. I attempted to question Luke further. Honestly, he was rather pointless but likely correct. He tried to persuade Amy, but she refused to listen, and he kind of shrugged at me when I urged him for further assistance because he couldn't make her do the tests if she didn't want to. And believe me, that's a dead end. I spoke with my lawyer and did a lot of research on this. The issue is that Luke might theoretically ask the court to require Tom and the others to undergo a paternity test. The problem is that if he did this, he would be essentially maintaining the version of events that he slept with Amy and thinks her children are his. However, Luke has adamantly maintained that he never cheated on me and that nothing ever transpired with Amy. He would have to go on record and make a claim he isn't ready to make. But whether or not he is being truthful about it is another matter. No judge will force Amy to provide samples of her children's DNA, since he is optimistic the children are not his and has no plans to fight for custody of them. Additionally, Tom is old enough that his assent would be relevant. Luke would probably not have a case if he and Amy both declined to take the test. He would have to go after one of Amy's younger kids, such as the twins. But he's not interested in doing that. He says he already knows something isn't true. Therefore, he doesn't want to drag his best friend to court to prove it. Since pursuing this will break everything and, in my lawyer's opinion, isn't realistic anyway, Luke is pleading with me to trust him and let everything go. To prove paternity, Luke would have to first confess to having an affair, which he would not do. Even though I would require additional evidence in a court case, if he did, that would essentially be all the proof I needed to be positive. Insisting that I didn't want Tom and Sophie dating, I put more pressure on him about it. Amy apparently still agrees with Luke. Luke intends to speak with Tom and switch on Papa Bear's protective mode. He will, among other things, warn Tom that it will be illegal for him to have an intimate relationship with Sophie when he reaches 18 in a few months. Since I know he would never do anything against Sophie's wishes, I would file charges against him. However, I'm not beyond hinting at the possibility. Fortunately, Luke isn't either. I did ask him if he would be willing to perform a private paternity test by surreptitiously swiping a sample of Tom's DNA. Still, he was pretty apprehensive about the prospect. He thought it was unethical, just like me. He also pointed out that our friendship with Amy would end if we did this, and she found out. I understand how much Luke wants this to happen, and he thinks that things are probably still salvageable enough for Amy and me to get back together and reestablish our friendship. However, I think Amy would be furious if I performed a DNA test on Tom behind her back, and she found out. I wouldn't hold it against her, though I would be curious to see the findings. Luke ultimately decided to spend the night with Amy. I wasn't pleased about it, and I know you're all flinching and spitting up. They had a lengthy talk, but he insisted he had to control the damage, so they stayed the night together. In contrast, Luke emphasized that nothing had happened. I didn't get any sleep at all, and I asked him for updates. As far as I can tell, Amy will calm down, but she needs some time. When Luke returned the following morning, we discussed the situation. After a heartfelt discussion, we decided to take the children. Our children, not Amy's, to spend a few days with their grandparents. We've been there previously, so even though it was an unexpected visit, they were happy to have us. I simply wanted to spend some time with our family, away from Amy's side of the family, as it were. Seeing my in-laws, who I'll call Jim, 75 male, and Kat, 67 female, is always a pleasure. Although Reddit is well known for its stories of the mother-in-law from hell, that couldn't be further from the reality in my life. When they noticed how far apart Luke and I were, I finally gave in and shared my anxieties since I felt so much safer with them. I expressed to them my fear that Amy's children might be his, and that she and Luke were having an affair. When I told them what I was thinking, Kat gave Jim a sharp look and sighed dramatically. This is where things started to get a little dicey. As it turns out, Kat has shared my concerns and sincerely suspected that Luke and Amy were closer than they would ever acknowledge, that they had gone too far in the past. Jim, however, just won't even entertain the possibility. He has consistently maintained that Kat is seeing unreal objects. Luke and Amy, he insists, are like siblings and would never act in such a way. In Kat's opinion, his position on this is foolish. Even if she and Jim had adopted Amy and loved her as a daughter, it didn't follow that Luke saw her as a sister, or that she saw him as a brother. Jim, however, persisted in his insistence that this is who they are and always have been. I can tell that he and Kat have had this conversation before because they continued to circle back and forth while Kat became frustrated. She made the point that since Luke and Amy are not surrogate siblings and are not biological siblings, nothing was preventing them from having sex if they were attracted to each other. Jim simply sighed and left the discussion at that time. To be clear, I never objected to Kat treating Amy's children as her grandchildren, but she has privately questioned if Luke was the father of Amy's children. That Kat never expressed these worries to me, it also doesn't bother me. She lacked evidence and didn't witness as much of Luke and Amy's intimacy in our adult lives as I did. The children, however, are doing fine. I'm trying to figure out what Amy told her kids. Still, I believe the official version of events, the broad consensus, is that Amy and I got into a quarrel, and that Luke and I told our kids that we needed some time apart. Luke stood up for me and ended the question when I asked for further details, claiming it was none of their business. My children and her children have each other's phone numbers and social media accounts, so they have likely remained in touch over the past 2 days. However, I'm unsure if Amy stuck to that version of events. I believe that my children would have informed Amy's children of any updates, and they would have informed them of anything else important that Amy had told them. We are aware of Sophie and Tom's strong relationship, after all. I tried to discuss that more with Sophie, but the timing was inappropriate. She disregarded my advice and took my reluctance due to my argument with Amy. She insisted that Tom was not her partner. She would stay close to him, though I'm still determining to what extent that's true. She also made it very apparent that she was sticking to her guns on this one, even though she isn't often a defiant child. Since they have known one another for years, I can't defend attempting to keep them apart and prohibiting them from becoming friends. Luke would have my back if they stopped hanging out, but he has my back when they are banned from dating. I would like a more conclusive update. I can notify you if something noteworthy occurs over the next few days. For my personal peace of mind, I'm mainly just mad at myself for not doing the secret test, since I feel like I'm now shut out of the only opportunity to obtain conclusive evidence either way. I gave my children a lot of thought. Ultimately, I decided I had to inform Sophie of the issue immediately, no matter what else transpired. She needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into. To hell with Luke and whatever that meant for him. To hell if that meant that all the kids found out about the situation. I, therefore, covertly prevented her from attending school. After returning home last night, I dropped everyone off this morning, saving Sophie for later, and then I drove straight past her school and told her we needed to chat. I quickly clarified that she was not in trouble. But she needed to know the truth about why Amy and I were fighting and why she couldn't date Tom. It's always scary for a teenager to hear from a parent, I mentioned very politely that I had gotten the feeling that maybe Luke and Amy had been intimate at one time throughout the years, because of their closeness to Amy and Tom's likeness to him. That would be a severe issue if that were the case, and there was a possibility that Tom's father was, in fact, Luke. Sophie remained silent the entire time, and even after I had halted to give her a chance to answer, she took a long time to say that we should get Tom and talk to him about this as well. When I didn't object, she texted him to arrange a meeting. I ignored them since Sophie received straight A's, which is significant, even though they both skipped school today. Sophie asked me to tell Tom what I told her when he came to see us. I apologized to both of them for not coming forward sooner and to him for any suggestion that I didn't think he was suitable for my daughter. Reddit blew my mind when Tom and Sophie just stared at each other in a strangely knowing way. Sophie was the first to speak, and Tom supported her. They told me they already knew about Luke and Amy, or at least they had a strong suspicion. Tom seems to have overheard dubious talks and the sounds of closeness coming from Amy's room, things he would prefer to forget. However, it appears that Amy's lover was Luke. After much contemplation, Tom confided in Sophie about his worries in January. She concurred with them. Additionally, she noticed an odd bond between her father and his mother. Luke was probably having an affair, they agreed. They decided that Luke might be Kaylee's father due to her allergy. Tom's other brothers might also be Luke's if Kaylee were his daughter. Tom might even be Luke's child. When the math showed them where I was, Sophie and Tom devised a small plan. It turns out that they have never been in love, and are not now. Even though they are still only best friends, they shared my feeling that they didn't want to ruin our entire family and social circle without more concrete proof, which Tom has been trying to obtain. Sophie was reluctant to tell me the truth because she knew it would break me, even though she wanted to. She was unaware of the silent anguish I was already going through. Sophie said she was sorry she hadn't spoken about her suspicion earlier. We both sobbed, to be honest, and I made sure she knew how much I loved her and that none of this was her fault. In the end, Sophie and Tom aren't genuinely interested in dating and previously suspected they might be half-siblings. That was their plan to upset everyone, to make Luke and Amy take action instead of continuing to make fun of me. In my opinion, it was also a form of retribution against Tom and Sophie for their affair. They came up with the concept that they wanted to date because teenagers may be vengeful. Apparently, all the inappropriate touches and flirtations I saw were planned to take advantage of either Amy, Luke, or both. They were expected to perspire due to this, and Sophie and Tom anticipated that they would leap from their seats to prevent it. They kind of caught the kids off guard when I did it instead. They could not comprehend why I was more concerned than the real cheaters. They started to think that perhaps I was aware. Tom was attempting to determine whether or not I knew when he confronted me about why he couldn't date Sophie. Perhaps I shouldn't be shocked. Tom and Sophie have always confided in one another and been good friends. To be honest, I'm simply glad they're not dating, but perhaps I should be a bit more worried about how cunning they've been. I suppose they already knew they were probably connected, but they might be lying to confuse things. When I informed them, they didn't even blink. When Tom said he had been a little irritated that I had previously been so against him dating my daughter, we laughed a little. "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" I questioned him in jest, and Tom, bless him, dismissed my question with a shrug, saying, "She is, but so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either. Where do we go from here, is the question at hand in any case. We need to solve that." I must admit that telling Sophie has been a relief, and I feel like an elephant has removed a foot from my chest. It is essential to me to have her and Tom on my side. Even though I recently received concrete proof that Luke is having an affair with Amy, I kind of knew that previously. So the only thing left to do is figure out what to do. Tom has already offered to send in his DNA so I can compare it to Luke's, and I agree with Sophie and Tom when they say I shouldn't tell Luke and Amy. I can never tell them how much it means. They are both entirely on my side. Tom has also attempted to install cameras in Amy's room. Hearing it from my daughter made it more evident than ever that Sophie was correct in the first place, and it was done entirely in my name. Sophie informed me bluntly that I needed to divorce her father. He cannot attempt to compel a sale or assert ownership rights during the divorce process. It is a massive relief because it means I have a legal claim. Given this, my lawyer suggested it would probably be easy for me to keep the property, mainly as I am our children's primary caregiver. Additionally, I've finally discussed everything with my mother-in-law, Kat. I was able to be honest with her once she sought out. Despite her silence, Kat confirmed her thoughts about Luke and Amy because she didn't want to start a fight. She said she had witnessed Luke and Amy acting in ways that had felt too familiar for years. Jim has reportedly always maintained that it was simply sibling closeness, but Kat now acknowledges that her concerns were valid. Naturally, she is appalled and has offered her unwavering support, which has been immensely consoling. In the meantime, Sophie and Tom have been incredible allies throughout this ordeal. They have shown great maturity and encouragement. I genuinely value the guidance I've gotten from this site and from close friends to put my own health first and concentrate on my kids' welfare during this process. Luke and Amy, on the other hand, are still unaware of any DNA tests or my separation efforts. Luke has acted like nothing is wrong, which is now practically absurd. I'm remaining composed and planning carefully. Although this process has been devastating, I now feel stronger and more clear-headed than before anything happened with Amy. But he stopped talking when I showed him the evidence. At first, he attempted to deny it by stating it was old or innocent. Still, I remained silent and stood there as he fumbled for an explanation. He eventually gave up and understood that he couldn't get out of this by talking his way out of it. He became irate upon seeing the garbage bags containing his possessions, accusing me of exaggerating, and he declined to talk about it then. He claimed I was exaggerating the situation and destroying our family. I told him to go and made it plain that our marriage was finished. He attempted to protest, but I resisted and told him he had gone too far. Finally, he picked up the bags and walked out. I returned inside, feeling oddly relieved but emotionally spent. I feel as though I've been waiting for this closure. Thanks to Sophie and Tom's steadfast support, I've collaborated with Paige on the legal proceedings ever since. They've been managing things better than I could have imagined, which gives me the courage to know they're supporting me. To assist us in processing and moving on, I've started therapy sessions for both the kids and myself. Even though it will be a long path, I feel stronger and like I can finally take charge of my life. Anything with Amy kept trying to persuade me not to tear our family apart even 2 weeks ago. I might have wilted under him because the manipulation and gaslighting were truly masterclass. But I can see through it now. I didn't tell him that I knew he was full of crap. I didn't tell him what I had seen. I just told him we were finished. He tried a different approach. He refused to go, stated firmly that our children were his too, and that even if we were separating, I had no right to just decide the kids would stay with me over him. This is where I very coldly presented the paperwork, reminding him that the house was in my name, and told him under no circumstances would my kids be staying with Amy. He argued a while longer, but in the end, he decided to be the bigger person and keep the peace. At that moment, I didn't care where he went before he left. He did ask about his phone and laptop, and I waved him off by saying they were in one of the bags bought a little time. I couldn't sleep for the rest of that night. I cried more. Eventually, I realized I'd have to wake my children up early and explain the extent that I could naturally. I woke Sophie first. I told her that I had kicked her father out, and that I had discovered evidence of an affair on his devices. I did not specify what kind of evidence, and she did not ask. I woke up the others and gently told them that their dad had gone to stay somewhere else for a while, that I wasn't sure where. But from now on, things were going to be different. Louie was the one to ask if we were getting divorced, and I couldn't lie to her. I told her yes. Owen asked when they could see their father again, and I wanted to cry. Sophie was a very big help, urging her siblings to be sympathetic to me right now and worry about Dad later. I knew better than to poison them against their father. Paige warned me against doing that as well, so I only told Sophie that the affair was confirmed since she had already been in the know. However, as the kids were getting ready for school, Owen approached me and asked me, point blank, if it was about Amy, if Luke was going to be with her instead of me. I couldn't answer, but I suppose that's an answer on its own. Got the kids to school, and my next step was calling to have the locks changed. I knew Luke would be back for his devices before long, but thankfully Paige returned with them before he showed up again. It was a very quick visit. She just told me that all was accomplished, and she had records of everything we would need in court. Sure enough, Luke turned up an hour later demanding to know where his laptop and phone were. I had them set back in our bedroom like they had never moved, and I just told him he had forgotten them. He insisted that I had said they were in one of the bags, so I just shrugged him off and told him I must have been mistaken after he grabbed them. He tried again to reason with me, but I just showed him the door. I knew the kids would start to come home from school before long, and I think he was trying to delay leaving so he could see them. I was not having it. I started shouting again and sent him on his way. I'm still just in absolute pain and despair for what I saw. I don't know if he'll realize that anyone went through his devices and made copies of the evidence, or if he suspects I saw anything, but he obviously didn't say so. After he left, I cried once again. I talked to my mother-in-law that night. Apparently Luke did show up to his parents' house, which was a surprise as I was so certain he'd stay with Amy. But maybe even he knows how suspicious that would look to the children, and doesn't want to rock the boat as much. Maybe he knows I'm more likely to let my children see their grandmother than Amy at this point, and he wants to see them to give his version of events that is not happening. Kat already shared his version with me that he relayed to her and Jim that I'm having some kind of mental breakdown that he wishes he could help me. But my paranoia is causing me to lash out and turn violent. I was never violent. I shoved him away when he tried to hold me. That is all, and what's so hilarious is that he didn't mention Amy at all to his parents. He didn't even frame it as me falsely believing he was having an affair. Even though that's his story, when talking to me, he left Amy out of it when talking to his parents. Kat noticed that she believes me. Jim doesn't know what to believe anymore. According to Kat, he seemed very, very troubled by what he heard from all sides. As for Amy, she's radio silent. Tom has told Sophie that she's acting like nothing is wrong, but is clearly stressed out that when her children ask, she makes the same. Went outside. I did hear what sounded like Jim shouting at Luke. He doesn't usually shout, he's the calmest man I've ever met, so in a way I'm worried about him, but also relieved that the wool is being pulled off of his eyes. According to Kat, Luke is still staunchly denying everything. He was pretty upset when he found out that I had poached Zach, though, which gave me a kind of grim satisfaction. The test results came back. Sophie and Tom tested their DNA against each other to see if they truly are blood siblings. Here's the surprise, according to the test, they're not. They don't share any DNA to everyone who believed Jim had fathered Amy's babies. Here's a definitive proof that he did not, because the test would have revealed that too, but I never believed it anyway. Sophie has her doubts and wonders if the results weren't faulty and if we should take another test to be absolutely certain. But I'm not really worried about that, more confused than anything. I was so certain Tom had to be Luke's son. He was too. Now he doesn't know what to think, and I don't either. I obviously know the affair happened and lasted years, and I know from the letters that Kaylee is Luke's child, or at least both he and Amy seem to believe she is, which confirms that they were intimate 15 years ago. Now I'm just wondering for Tom's sake, who, if not Luke, is his father? He does kind of look like Luke, but that might just be coincidence in general. Everything was quiet for a few days until it wasn't until she finally showed her face, my best friend Amy. I'm so happy I installed Ring cameras everywhere. As you are about to understand, sure enough, Amy turned up on my doorstep and asked to talk. She had a relaxed demeanor and did not raise her voice. Assuming she was approaching me on Luke's behalf, I told her that I wasn't interested in talking to her and to just go away. She did not leave, but she didn't make a scene either. She persisted in telling me we needed to have a conversation. The kids weren't home and did have cameras inside. I was also recording her on my phone and being discreet about it, so eventually I relented and let her in. I don't know if she realized she was on camera. We sat down on the couch and she instantly got into the reason for her visit. Turns out she and Luke know or suspect that I secured damning material from his laptop. Amy accused me of going through his devices and told me that anything I found was not my business, and I needed to delete it. That was all she had to say. No. Apology. No. Admission of guilt didn't take responsibility for her own behavior. Hell, she might have known I was recording her because she didn't even directly acknowledge what the sensitive material on Luke's laptop actually was. So I confronted her, letting out some of my anger. I asked how she could have the nerve to make demands of me. I asked why she and Luke would do a thing like this in the first place. Why had they seen fit to spend all these years betraying me? I posed the question that I'd been wondering about for a long time, and as I expected, I got no answer. Literally, Amy didn't seem to really hear me. Even as I confronted her, she seemed like she was stressed, panicked even. But she was keeping it under wraps. She ignored my questions and accusations, just kept telling me to delete whatever content from Luke's laptop that I had. She said that if I wanted to divorce Luke, that was my call, but not to drag her into it. Oh, that made me so mad I kept my temper, but I did snap back that she was already very much in it. Amy just kept repeating herself, telling me to delete whatever I found, so I just refused. I asked her point blank why did I have any reason to? Amy got more aggressive, raising her voice. She was trying to intimidate me, but I held my ground. She told me that this wasn't about me, and that I needed to just do as she said, that it was very important. So I asked again why, and yet again she would not answer. So I asked her if Luke had sent her to do this, or if she had shown up on her own. No answer to that either. It was like talking to a brick wall. So I asked her to leave, just as I'd been afraid of she wouldn't go. She refused to leave until I had deleted everything I found in front of her. I couldn't help laughing. I told her no, that wasn't going to happen. This is where I could see her starting to freak out more. In another moment, she got up, ran into the other room, and grabbed my laptop before I could stop her. She smashed it on the floor. I really don't know why she thought that would work, or get her the outcome she wanted. I think she was just panicking. Obviously, I still have everything, except now I need to buy a new laptop. And sadly, her doing this was out of frame of the camera. But it's fine. All of my important files are backed up, and at the moment I was more concerned that Amy would do something else drastic. She looked like she was going to have a breakdown. I tried again, very calmly, to tell her that she needed to leave, or I would call the police. She refused again and just kept repeating her demand that I drop this whole cheating angle and divorce Luke without trying to argue that an affair took place. At that point, I just stared at her, at the woman I had considered one of my dearest friends in all the world, and I told her that I didn't owe her anything, but she owed her children the truth, that they had the right to know where they came from, who Luke really was to them. Amy bristled and told me it was none of my business, that I didn't understand her family, and I needed to back off. She kept going back to the idea that I could divorce Luke, but I must not claim he'd had an affair with her. I just told her that I didn't need her permission to handle my divorce, how I wanted, and told her again to leave. She got more and more desperate, and her anger accelerated to the point that she physically attacked me. I did not expect her to actually do this. I'm not much of a fighter, but I do know the human body pretty well, and where it's weakest she hurt me pretty badly. But I got her off of me. That part was very much on camera, and the whole audio was recorded on my phone. She finally left after that, and I immediately called to file a police report. I had the strangest feeling she'd tried something similar and wanted to beat her to the punch. I was able to clean myself up by the time I had to face my kids, and while I downplayed the story, I did not lie to them about why I had a black eye. I told them for their own safety to steer clear of Amy. I also sent the footage to Paige and Zach, as well as pictures of my injured state before I cleaned up. They've also printed out the letters that reference Kaylee as Luke's child. I really feel like Amy just screwed herself over on all this. I don't know what her motives were. Was she protecting Luke? Was this his idea? Does she just really not want the world to know she's a homewrecker? Is she covering her own butt as if people don't already know? The more of my social circle I talk to and inform of the basics, the more people are confessing that they had wondered in the past if Luke wasn't cheating on me but didn't have any concrete proof. I suppose Amy doesn't want her kids to know who fathered them, which does line up, but I'm still not sure about Tom. I didn't ask any about him in particular. The sound of my laptop breaking is definitely on my phone and should be on the camera as well. So far as I know, she hasn't been arrested. But I am aiming for a restraining order now. Has Amy been arrested for assault? She's not in contact with her family and hasn't been for many years. They abused her. Luke's family became her family. She never actually admitted to having an affair. Actually, I noticed that Luke now has a lawyer. He met Zach and Paige, but I don't know him. I should have Amy arrested, everyone says. I emailed the video to my lawyer, but I definitely could have if I had shown it to the cops. Perhaps this makes me stupid, but I still believe that a part of me tries to be forgiving and protective of the people I used to love. Jim had a heart attack a few days ago, so everything has been put on hold. I saw Amy, Luke, and Amy's children at the funeral. We were all together for the first time since everything that had happened. No one discussed what was happening except for Amy's brief apology for the previous incident. I'll give her credit for her sincerity, but I wasn't going to confront her. In any case, Amy, Luke, and Kat appeared to be in complete despair. I was too, but we all decided to keep the day peaceful and concentrate on Jim instead of arguing over the divorce. I had a pleasant discussion about him with Luke. I've been taking a few days off from work and spending time with my children. They're on the back burner enough for me. Along with me, Luke saw the children twice before and after the burial. Both Sophie's and mine directions went smoothly. Luke didn't try anything amusing with them, and they didn't bring up Amy. He probably misses them and regrets that he cannot see them because of everything. In addition to not being able to see Dad as frequently as they used to, the kids are also quite sad over losing Grandpa. None of them, I believe, blame me, but that isn't really the point. To be honest, Carter spent the last 3 nights in my bed. Whoever said that Kat lied about the test results was right. She admitted to me that she never sent them in. She probably didn't want to go behind her son's back, but she was at ease lying to me to keep him safe until she didn't, until she felt terrible and told the truth. I'm not upset with her because of the situation, but I've learned not to put my trust in her. As far as I know, she did not disclose the test to Luke, but it implies that Tom may still be Luke's son. He most likely is. My lawyers used a finer tooth comb to finish combing through the letters from Luke and Amy. The bottom conclusion is that they undoubtedly discovered what Amy didn't want me to see, and I now fully comprehend her terror. It has to do with the reasons Amy and Luke chose not to be married the traditional way. They did something horrible, but even in an anonymous online post, I'm not sure I should discuss this. With everything else going on, I haven't even been able to gather my thoughts regarding what Amy and Luke did, so I'm unsure if I should be more direct. Please try to understand, even though I know it's not what anyone expected to hear. When in doubt, don't post it. Paige concurred. Since I'm not in a state to decide how to go with it or whether I should use it against them, I've instructed my lawyers to put a pen on it for the time being. To be honest, I feel like a complete mess. I can't help but blame myself for Jim. Luke and Amy must also be blaming themselves, in my opinion. I don't forgive them, but this broke them up just as much as it broke me, and I believe that Jim was so stressed out by the divorce that it may have had a part in it. I specifically blame myself for showing him what I showed him, since he already had heart trouble. Just before he passed away, I presented him with evidence of the affair. Even if I shouldn't, I'll think about that for a long time. My kids and I are currently in therapy, and based on what I've heard, Amy's kids are too, so that's excellent. I should concentrate on more constructive ways to let go of my emotions. However, I have discussed these posts with my therapist, and she believes that, in certain situations, it can be beneficial to vent anonymously online. If I do so again, I might discuss my life in a new subreddit. I am still deciding. The judge and I have also met. Many were concerned that I would face legal repercussions for these posts. They won't, to put it simply. In technical terms, there is no risk of slander or defamation, because they are anonymous. The blogs will be insignificant in the case, so I'm free to continue writing them as long as I don't mention the case itself. However, I believe the court would prefer I stop writing these. I've changed enough pointless facts and given everyone fictitious names. One of the reasons I might do so is that, without going into details, I went ahead and revealed what I had discovered, and chaos ensued. Amy and Luke had taken a different turn after Jim's death, so I knew I had to. They started arguing that Luke and I had always been married openly, that an affair couldn't possibly exist, and that any evidence of Luke having an affair with Amy couldn't be used against him. They didn't just decide to do this after Jim passed away. As far as I can tell, he was the only other person who was aware of what Luke and Amy had done and would have taken action. I believe they wanted to say that I was aware of the affair all along, and that it was not a real affair now that they don't have to worry about it. They must have revised their story when I didn't report them since they thought I didn't know the truth. However, I was aware that I reported it, and now they face consequences. Regretfully, everyone else discovered it too. The youngsters were bound to hear the truth through the grapevine. I personally informed Sophie and Tom, assuming they would find out anyhow. Tom had a severe case of shell shock. Though there wasn't much I could do, I felt awful and wanted to console him. I knew I was just the messenger. Kay, poor thing, didn't take it well. She reportedly had multiple breakdowns before attempting to flee. She sought refuge at our home, but I had to return her. Despite Amy's requests, I was pretty tempted to let Kay stay with us even though I knew I had to. But alas, I had to give her up. Nothing has been more complex than that. I feel like I betrayed her even though it wasn't my fault. In addition, Sophie had harbored a great deal of resentment toward her father, mainly when he and Amy had Kay return to live with me. Sophie and Kay were most affected by this. When Luke asked to see her again, Sophie refused to come out of her room. Although my daughter is 15 years old, I was technically supposed to let him see her. She refused to leave her room when I instructed her to, so I tried, in my opinion. I'm not proud to report that I yelled at Luke to leave when he pushed me to evict Sophie from her room after Kay's incident. By then, my blood was boiling. My soon-to-be ex-husband and his affair partner continue to paint me as the villain in all of this. That Luke and Amy are upset with me would be an understatement. At least they're acting irate, but they have no reason to be. I was very sure Amy would approach me after the occurrence, and she did, so I now have a restraining order against her. After I reported them, Amy came to the house while my kids were home, shouted and hammered on the door before Kay arrived. I don't know what she wanted me to do, but she was upset with me for what I had done. Amy was gone when the cops arrived, so they were just as worthless as the last time I contacted them. Amy followed Kay when she came to me for asylum, but I wouldn't let her in until she phoned the police on her own. In my opinion, only one of them could take Kay. Amy had no intention of entering my home. I explained the problem clearly, yet it made no difference. Later, Amy falsely accused me of kidnapping and defamed me on social media. Despite my temptation, I corrected the record without saying too much about the situation. When I saw Luke, he also gave me the lecture of my life, but I kept interrupting him and spewed the facts in his face. I'm not sure if it's because I've been away from him, but I'm starting to see how he manipulates others, whereas before, I always fell for it. He always sounds pleasant and sensible, but his words are frequently evasive and circular. I'm furious with him because of what he did to his kids, especially Kay. I'd like to adopt that young woman. I want to, but I know I can't. I also had a lengthy conversation with Kat. From what I understand, she was unaware of it and apologized for her previous dishonesty. Rebuilding trust takes time, but I also recognize that she was in a terrible situation. I feel sorry for her because she's in a mess now that some things have come to light. In addition, I'll need all the assistance I can get if Amy loses custody of her kids, which is highly possible. I don't have the room to absorb them all. I'm trying to allow Kat to regain my trust because she will have to perform some legwork, which is out of necessity. I can't speak for the long run, but if everything goes according to plan, Luke won't even be able to visit my children. However, we'll find out soon enough, and it will be documented whether he fathered Amy's children. Despite never testing her, I know they have always been sure Kay was. As far as I can tell, Amy hasn't been intimate with anyone but Luke for a while. For the record, Kat continues to provide financial support to Amy, which includes providing for Amy's children. That doesn't bother me. It will all be resolved if Amy loses custody. I did my best to piece it together from the letters regarding how and why Luke and Amy met. Luke was reportedly the first person Amy felt comfortable exploring her sexuality with throughout their high school years, after experiencing sexual abuse as a child. It was a horrible idea, and long before they made that decision, they understood why. Regarding the falsehood that they were surrogate siblings, it seems they had that emotional bond from the beginning. Still, they also did this after Tom was born. Based on the letters, they also thought Tom was theirs. The relationship also became more passionate. According to Amy, Luke is my person, he agrees. I did take my time reading the letters. Even though it made me sick, I wanted to understand. I'm improving overall, but I feel bad about it because no one else is. Even though I am miserable because my children are miserable, I want them to recognize that there is hope. I'm not going to say that I'm happy that Luke and Amy are unhappy, but I'm not sure what they were hoping for. For decades, they have been engaging in a terrible game that will eventually have repercussions. Amy's children, particularly Kay, are unhappy. I wish I could contact her again, but I can't unless it's through Tom, and he must be careful. Even cats are unhappy. We're all still in shock at Jim's passing, and I must admit that the Kay incident broke my heart. However, I believe I'm past my low point, and I'm finding solace in the fact that, for once, I'm choosing me. She only posted posts accusing me of kidnapping Kay and lying about her and Luke, which generated a lot of uproar. I went through legal channels, not social ones. He resides with Amy, but I don't think it's going well. Her kids aren't thrilled with him or her. Most folks still appeared to believe me or think it was a misunderstanding, even after I clarified the situation. That was just Luke's lawyer's comment regarding her allegations of an open marriage. It's not common, at least not in my experience. The paternity of Amy's children has not been established by any of them. She insists they are not Luke's. Even if they were, it would only be between them. That will be resolved via DNA testing. Everything will be determined by them. Regarding my reporting, she and Luke insist they are unaware of the charges I make against them. Still, I have evidence that they were aware of them. As for Amy's actions, it's really frustrating when someone tries to manipulate the narrative to paint themselves as the victim. I'm trying my best to handle it with a level head, even though it's difficult not to feel guilty about how this affects everyone, especially the kids. My instinct to protect Kay is strong, and it's evident that I care deeply about her well-being. It's difficult to comfort her, but I know I have to respect boundaries. It breaks my heart that the children are caught in the crossfire of adult decisions, but being honest with them will help them get through this difficult time. Regarding Luke and Amy, they are obviously attempting to manipulate the story to suit their own interests. Still, I am sticking to my guns and reminding myself that I am not accountable for their behavior or the consequences of their decisions. I am simply taking each day as it comes, knowing that I am doing the best I can for my children. That's it for today's video. Remember to hit the notification bell, like, and subscribe if you want to be updated. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope to share more soon. Until we meet again.